Hello, I'm Smartryk Foster, and welcome to my channel, Smartryk Foster Productions. Welcome to episode 2 of How to Craft a Story. In this episode, I'm going to read chapter 1 from my book, How to Craft a Story. If you would like to buy a copy of the book, there is a link to my website in the description below. This video has been subtitled in English. If you would like to activate subtitles, please click the CC button near the bottom right of this video. If you would like this video to be subtitled in another language, please let me know in the comment section below. Before I continue, I would like to glorify God. I'm Christian, and God told me to write this book. If you appreciate the contents of this book, thank Him, not me. I wrote almost the entire book through the gift of the Holy Spirit, called Word of Knowledge. Some examples were included in this book by permission of the Lord Jesus Christ. Let's begin with Chapter 1. Chapter 1. Pattern. We learn by identifying patterns. We take two pieces of information and try to find a connection between them. The more information that we find, like puzzle pieces, and the more connections we find between that information, which is like putting the puzzle pieces together, the more clearly we see and can understand the information as a whole. Even if we put some puzzle pieces in the wrong places, it's easier for us to see those mistakes and to try to correct them when we look at the picture as a whole. Before we can solve the puzzle, we need puzzle pieces and a surface to put them on. That surface, the foundational knowledge that is needed, is this: emotion and structured communication. Emotion plus story equals art. Emotion is the most basic form of communication between living creatures. Every creature produces emotional communication. We see that communication through a creature's behavior. Sometimes we can feel the emotions that another creature is experiencing. Every creature that can feel empathy has the ability to recognize the emotional communication that another living creature is producing. Emotions are a state of being communication. It is possible to recognize that a creature is experiencing emotions, and perhaps what those emotions are, but it is not possible to know why the creature is experiencing them. We cannot know why a person is experiencing an emotion unless someone explains it to us. We can guess the reasons why if we look at the information that was surrounding that person at the time when that person began to feel that emotion, but we cannot know without doubt unless it's explained to us. Structured communication is a way of trying to communicate emotions and thoughts. Thoughts are our way of structuring information in our minds. Spoken words are spoken thoughts. Almost everything in life that is around us evokes emotion within us. It's easier to remember something if we attach an emotion to it. Thinking is our way of trying to arrange emotional communication into a logical order. We do that to try to understand the reason behind the communication. We try to identify a pattern. Most of the time, we think in terms of language. We use words such as nouns and verbs that identify things which we attach emotional information to. We also use other words when we arrange nouns and verbs into a structured pattern. Spoken language is our way of trying to convey information that is in our structured thoughts. Spoken language is often accompanied by body language, which is one way of conveying emotional communication. Also, the way in which we speak is often infused with emotional communication. Our tone of voice, the pace of our speech, the words which we use to structure our sentences, and the emphasis that we place on individual words all convey emotional information. If we want other people to understand our thoughts, we must present our thoughts to them in a structured way. Our communication should have a beginning, a middle, and an end. People learn by identifying patterns. People more easily arrange information in their minds when that information fits into a pattern. The reason why communication should have a beginning is because the beginning tells a person what the communication will be about. The beginning introduces the information. Communication should be separated into digestible portions. One way of separating information is by topic. The beginning of communication introduces a topic, and the body or the middle of the communication should give more detail about that topic. The beginning introduces the topic so that a person can structure the information that is in the middle based on the pattern that was introduced through the beginning. Another way of looking at it is that the beginning is a small picture, and the middle contains the puzzle pieces which a person needs to use to be able to see a more detailed version of the small picture. The end contains the final puzzle pieces, and sometimes an overview explanation of how the puzzle pieces fit together. Many forms of communication use the basic pattern of having a beginning, a middle, and an end. Some of the differences between those types of communication are the type of information that they convey and the amount of emotion that is attached to the information. Essays can have some amount of emotional information attached to them. Technical instruction manuals are often devoid of emotional information. Art, in comparison, is a form of communication that can be infused with emotion. Whether it is through a casual conversation or a great artistic work, the art of storytelling is one of the best ways to convey emotional information. Story equals story structure plus storytelling. A story is made of two things: story structure and storytelling. Story structure is the information of a story, and storytelling is how you present the information to an audience. Story structure and storytelling mix together on a detailed level, but from a story construction viewpoint, they are two different things. A story can be presented through many different mediums, such as a novel, poem, movie, video game, song, radio play, musical production, sand art, dance, etc. The structure of each of those mediums is different and requires a different method of storytelling. A story can also be told from different viewpoints and perspectives, depending on what you want to focus on and what meaning you want to convey to the audience. I want to address this question before we go any further. How do I know when my story is ready? The answer is, ready for what? Before you can make yourself ready, you need to know what you're getting ready for, and you need to know what you require to be able to be ready. You need to know what the goal is, and what things are necessary, quantifiably, to be able to achieve that goal. The key word is quantifiably. Maybe you think that a person cannot quantify the elements that are in a story, because a story is art and the interpretation of art is subjective. There is some truth to that. Each person processes information in their own way. There is no guarantee that a person will accurately interpret the meaning that an author is trying to convey, but that is true of any communication. An author should try to convey the intended meaning accurately by using communication that is common to both the author and the intended audience. That is why we have language. The letters and characters in a language are symbols which we attach meaning to. The arrangements of those letters and characters and the arrangements of sounds in a language are what we use to try to convey meaning. The point behind language is that different people attach the same meaning to a specific arrangement of symbols and sounds, so that those symbols and sounds can be used as a common method by which to accurately communicate meaning. How can you accurately convey the meaning that you intend to convey unless you use language accurately? You can't write emotions, That is true. But you can write in ways that evoke emotional responses in people through your use of language. Emotion is the most basic form of communication between creatures. People attach emotions to life experiences similarly to the way in which people attach meanings to symbols and sounds in a language. When you describe an experience, a person who has gone through a similar experience may feel the same emotions that they felt at the time when they were going through that experience. When you describe an experience, you're using another form of symbolism, which people have attached meaning to. You can use description in language as a way of conveying emotional information. How can you quantify emotional information? Emotional information can be quantified on a scale of strength. There are many different emotions which have strengths which vary between weak and strong. Languages have many words which indicate the strength of specific emotions. Dictionary definitions of those words are often accompanied by descriptions of situations in which a person might experience those emotions. People who have empathy can receive emotional information by watching or listening to someone else go through an experience which evokes an emotion in that person. A person who has empathy can imagine and feel the emotions that another person might be feeling. Have you ever felt pain when you looked at someone else's wound? That feeling is caused by a combination of empathy and your imagination. Your body responds physically to your thoughts and emotions. Some experiences evoke more than one emotion in a person at the same time. End quote. I just want to stop here for a moment and focus on your body responds physically to your thoughts and emotions. An imagination can amplify emotions. That is a powerful storytelling tool. That is what creates a visceral response in the audience. Remember that example of feeling what another person might be feeling if you look at a person's wound? That feeling creates a physical response in the person's body. But that might not be what the person who has the wound is feeling. That feeling is caused by an imagined feeling of what the other person might be suffering based on what the person who is looking at the wound thinks about the wound. And sometimes the person's imagination might be making the person feel more pain than what the wound would have caused to the other person. Sometimes a person's imagination is stronger than what might happen in reality. That's why some people are afraid of doing things, but when they start doing them, they find out that it's not as bad as they thought it might be. If you use emotions and the audience's imagination, you can write in a way that takes the audience on an emotional journey while they're reading the story. You can evoke emotions in other storytelling mediums too. The way you speak when you're telling a story verbally can evoke emotions in the audience who hears you telling the story. Settings and context can convey and amplify some kinds of information. Sometimes, when a thing conveys emotions, those emotions can be amplified by the setting that the thing is in, and sometimes it can be amplified by having it clash with its surroundings so that it stands out compared to its surroundings, because the surroundings also convey emotional information. And there are things that go together and things that seem out of place. Okay, back to Chapter 1. The section heading, How do I know when my story is ready? Begin quote. Some experiences evoke more than one emotion in a person at the same time. Sometimes the best way to convey emotional information is to describe an experience and let the audience imagine what it would have been like to go through that experience. You can convey more emotional information if you use more detail when you describe an experience. People attach emotions to their own life experiences, but the key to evoking emotion is in knowing what to describe, how to describe it, and how much detail to use in the description. The description should be done in such a manner that it reminds the audience of their own experiences and the emotions which they felt during those experiences. Description can regulate the strength of the emotions that are being evoked in the audience. What, how, and how much are the keys to storytelling technique. The question is, what information are you trying to convey? Why are you telling the story? Who are you telling the story to? Those are two basic questions which must be answered. The question of why is asking what your goals are. Are you telling the story to make money? If you are, you should think about whom your audience will be and what your audience wants. Are you telling the story because you're trying to convey a specific meaning, or are trying to educate someone? Then you should think about what you want to say and the best way in which to say it so that your intended audience will be able to receive the information. End quote. That's important because you need to speak the same language as your audience so that your audience can understand what you're saying. When I say language, I mean a spoken language, but I'm also talking about the meaning attached to symbolism in the language, or in things that your audience is familiar with. Different things can have different meanings to different people. Some people attach meanings to things because of their culture, or things that happened in their lives. You should try to understand the way in which your audience will see things, or you should add context to your story to convey a meaning in a way you intend your audience to see it. If you know your audience, if you know what they want, you can build upon a common foundation that you and the audience understand. That foundation could be built upon things that you've said in the past. That is called context, and continuity lends itself to context. Back to the book. I am reading from Chapter 1, section heading titled, How Do I Know When My Story is Ready? Are you telling the story because you think that it's fun? That brings us to the next question. Who are you telling the story to? There are 4 basic answers to that question. You're writing the story for yourself. You're writing the story for someone else. You're writing the story for both yourself and someone else. Or you're writing the story for no person. If you're writing the story for yourself, then you can write whatever you want. You are the intended audience. If you're writing the story for someone else, then you should think about what you want to say and the best way to say it. Remember, storytelling is the art of presenting information. If you know your intended audience well enough, you can try to present the information to your audience in the best way in which they can receive and digest it. If you're writing the story for someone else as a job, you should ask for as much information as possible so that you can know what to put into the story. It may be a good idea to ask the person whom you're working for to give you as much information as possible about what to put into the story and why it needs to be there. It can be easier for you to create a story for the intended audience if you know what to put into the story and why those things need to be in the story. If you're writing the story for both yourself and someone else, you should think about a few things. Why do you want to tell the story? What story do you want to tell? What story does your boss, collaborator, or audience want? If you're writing the story for someone else as a job, but you also enjoy working on the story, you need to think more about what your boss wants than about what you want. If you're writing the story for yourself, but you want to present the story to other people, you should stay true to your creative vision and the meaning that you want to convey through the story. You should also think about how to present the story to your intended audience in a manner that is acceptable to that audience. Let's go back to the original question. How do you know when your story is ready? How do you know when your story, or a specific part of your story, has reached the goals that you or your boss have set? How do you know when the story is good enough that you can stop making changes to your story? To answer those questions, you should know how a story is structured and what tools are available to you to use. The answer is that your story is ready when it accomplishes all the goals. How do you accomplish those goals? Let us look at the structure of a story. Story structure equals plot plus character. A story structure basically consists of two elements, plot and characters. Some people think of a plot and create characters that fit into that plot. Some people create characters and then think of stories based around those characters. There are also other methods, such as creating a story based on the emotional impressions that you feel by listening to a musical score. The common thing between plot and characterization is that both of them need to make sense. It has been said that the human mind cannot distinguish between what is real and what is not real. It's been said that the mind processes information that it receives, and, in the absence of other information, assumes that the information that it is receiving is from the real world. That is why people can be immersed in a story by reading words that are on a page, even if that story is in an unrealistic setting compared to the real world. Even so, when people read a story, they want the story to make sense. People usually want the elements that are in a story to fit a logical pattern. They want the rules of the story world to be internally consistent, and they want the characterization of the characters to fit a logical pattern. One exception to the rule of fitting into a logical pattern is when something is so much fun that people want to believe that it is possible. The more fun that the audience thinks something is, the more the audience is willing to accept it. How do you know when an illogical thing is also fun enough to be accepted by the audience? Usually you don't. Not unless your audience tells you, or your audience tells another author who has already presented your illogical but fun idea to your audience. There are many things in published stories which do not fit into logical patterns. The more important thing is to make sure that your story fits the vision that you, or your boss, has for the story. End quote. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, stay tuned for episode 3 about the basics of a plot. Don't forget to leave a comment if you would like this episode to be subtitled in another language, or if you have any questions about this episode.